Hi. So today I'm going to be talking about how the castrati came about and how this has affected modern day opera and, in particular, mezzo sopranos. So in order to answer this question, we must define what a castrato is. A castrato is a boy who has been castrated in order to retain his high singing voice. Our modern day equivalent would be a soprano, a mezzo soprano, or a countertenor. But how did castration, which was originally a form of punishment, end up becoming a sacrifice for the musical art? Although castration can be traced back to the earliest civilizations of Mesopotamia, castrati in choirs wasn't actually seen until the 4th century in Constantinople. But when Constantinople was taken over, the choir was disbanded and castrati were not seen singing for another 400 years. When they reappeared, they returned to Italy, with the first castrato appearing in the Sistine Chapel in 1562. In 1588, Pope Sixtus V made a countrywide ban on women performing in churches, which meant that the only way the choirs could attain that large timbre of sound was by using castrati. And with the creation of castrati came the creation of opera. They were known to be the most virtuosic singers of all time because of their physical differences to that of regular men. Because they did not have the correct amount of testosterone in their body, their limbs grew bigger because their bones did not harden properly, and their torsos became elongated, which meant their ribs expanded, giving them a much larger lung capacity than that of any regular man. This gave them a massive advantage over any other singer, and in particular, women. However, there were more than a few disadvantages to the castrati, both physically and socially. Because of their lack of hormones, they did not go through puberty properly, which meant that they were having tantrums both on and off stage. This was a very feminine thing to do, which in the 18th century was not looked on so kindly. There was also the worry that they would influence the upper-class men with their socio-psychological sex drive, and rumours appeared that they were actually monsters intended to lure men into homosexuality. So why did the castrati begin to decline? In its prime, in the 1700s, around 4,000 boys in Italy were being castrated in the name of art annually. Only a handful of these would go on to have great operatic careers, with the rest spending their lives in church choirs. But as the economic situation in Italy improved, parents became less inclined to castrate their sons. As well as this, castration had always been illegal, with most castrati saying they had been castrated accidentally. This embarrassment about their origins began to increase, as well as the decline in popularity in opera seria. Castrati began finding themselves without a job. So how did women take over the jobs the castrati had previously done? Well, as I said before, women had been banned from performing in Rome and the Papal States because it was seen as a form of prostitution. And although some of them got around this by dressing up as castrati, even in the countries where acting and singing for women wasn't illegal, it was still seen no better than prostitution. Over time, women's popularity in opera increased, and they found themselves gaining more and more status, occasionally performing in place of castrati if one was unavailable. Although the idea of cross-dressing was very common in Baroque performances, both musical and not, it did not die out in opera as it did with the other arts. Women's ability to be so easily interchanged with castrati gave them a much better advantage. Towards the end of the 18th century, castrati and women were playing the same roles, with women actually taking the popularity over castrati. Castrati had begun to seem like archaic beasts that people were ashamed of. Composers such as Rossini were writing roles for women to play as men, such as Tancredi, Isolier in Le Cantori, and Malcolm in La Donna del Lago. So with the women's popularity increasing, why was it that tenors then took over the heroic roles? Although women were becoming increasingly popular over castrati, composers still found no problem with rewriting the roles for men to play instead of women. Composers such as Mozart would rewrite the hero roles for a tenor instead of castrati, such as Idomeno. The hero was changed into a tenor after only 5 years after its first production. After 1750, heterosexuality completely changed and men were encouraged to have sex as part of their masculinity. Therefore, when it came to write the hero roles, men then seemed the better choice. As tenors took over the hero roles, mezzo-sopranos took a step back and never really went back into the limelight when it came to the hero. They took over the roles such as the young page boys, like Cherubino in Marriage of Figaro. They looked younger and they had a high voice, like these young boys would have had, and they were more inclined to look like a young boy than a fully grown adult would. So how has this affected mezzo-sopranos in modern-day opera? Well, as tenors took over the hero roles and sopranos continued playing the heroine roles, mezzo-sopranos never really went back into that limelight. They're known as playing the bitches, witches and britches role, aka the wise woman, the villain, or the boy. Obviously there are exceptions to this, such as Bizet's Carmen or Rossini's Rosina in Barbara of Seville, but sadly these are only exceptions. But thankfully, with the revival of Baroque opera, mezzo-sopranos can once again step into that hero role. But being one of the last artists to cross-dress for the stage, has this had any psychological effect on the singers? Well, like all things, it varies across the stage. Alice Coutts, an established mezzo-soprano, once said in an interview, "I, by necessity, have had to dwell in a place where my mind feels increasingly separate from my sexual body. It has made it complex for me to return to daily life as a woman." This obviously shows that it does take a toll on mezzos who have had to go back and forth from playing these boy roles to being a woman and their feminine side. Another renowned mezzo-soprano, Cecilia Bartoli, also once said in an interview, "For women, it's impossible to reach the same capacity. Singing the woman repertoire, then, is much easier." This, again, only highlights the fact that women struggle to play that boy and to bring something out that they have not really experienced themselves. However, there are also mezzos who think the exact opposite. Josi Santos said in an interview, "To me, it is actually easy to portray a boy. I grew up with 3 brothers." Another mezzo, Emily Gray, said, "It's no different than any other role. It's about engaging empathy and having an awareness. There's no additional change other than posture." To conclude, castrati did have a massive impact on opera, as they were there from the very beginning. But it was both social and cultural views that changed and affected opera to what we know as today. As for the psychological effect that singing trouser roles has had on mezzos, well, I guess that one's just up to personal opinion, but it will always be known as one of opera's most favourite eccentricities. Thank you for watching. If you've got any questions or you want to know where I've got any of this information from, please put a comment in the box below and I'll happily answer anything. Thank you for watching.